So oftentimes we'll have a client that's doing great from a revenue standpoint, even probably great from a gross profit standpoint, but everything's shoved in that recurring bucket of revenue. And so objectively, if you just look at their P&L and they're printing like a 15 to 20% profit at the bottom line, there's really no problem. Like it's really hard to say, hey, let's fix what's broken. But we know there's other money out there. We know based on the typical blend of most MSPs that they'll be heavy into recurring revenue from agreements, but most clients absolutely want you to do project work for them.
Gary, this is I'm taking private conversations you and I have, and I'm airing the laundry, dude. All right. I'm putting it all out there. Earlier this week, I was sharing with you, some of the strategic plans that I'm working on with several companies. And one of them you just zeroed in on, and you're like, what are you doing to these poor people, Josh? You know better. And I was like, Gary, I don't see it. I'm blind. And you really pointed out that the plan is too deep. We've got, you didn't beat me up on the goal for the company that you thought we got that pretty right. I'm just reminding you. But once we got into those milestones and the volume of initiatives, that's when you had to beat me over the head with and say, you're trying to do too much. And you knew the company well enough to kind of know the strength of the leadership team, the size of the company they are. And you still came to that conclusion, you're trying to do too much. And I fought. I was like, no, man, I bet this really isn't that big of a deal. And, maybe pick that up for us of like, you saw the trap, you saw how overbuilt I made it, and simplify was what I heard from you. Maybe take us from there.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think with a lot of these, with companies that are kind of new to the goal setting exercise, and we go out there, we meet with them, and they're super excited about getting a plan going and starting down that process. I think that excitement kind of raises the bar of like what we think we can actually achieve, and we start shoving all of the things we ever thought of into our plan. And that's totally normal and totally reasonable to start with that, because you do want your session to kind of be open and brainstorming, and you want everyone to have a voice, and that's really the right approach. But it's our job as Bering, McKinley and the consultants to kind of take that, digest it, and put it into something that's actually attainable. And so when we talk about goals, we talk about SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So that attainable part is really where most companies miss the mark, because they get so excited about what they can actually do now that they're thinking about doing stuff. So that's where I see the trap being in these initiatives specifically.
Yeah, it's because I lived through that moment with you very recently. Of course, I'm saying, yeah, of course, I see it now. But I remember a number of years ago when we first started engaging with a consultant, a company called MAP, we love, and we had their founder on the podcast a couple weeks ago as well. So one of his consultants said something to me about, hey, likely you have too many initiatives going on. I mean, what you just described, Josh, you've got so many initiatives going on. And Gary, I was like, I didn't even hear his message. I was just so flattered that he called all the nonsense I work on an initiative. I was like, well, that sounds real businessy. That sounds like I'm a grown-up. I go, yeah, I have a lot of initiatives. It's taken me 6 years to really understand what an initiative means and what it really belies. So I wonder if maybe our listeners might be saying, well, I know the word initiative, but do you think you could come up with on the fly a definition of what an initiative actually is?
We'll be right back with more. But first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life. helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
I think another word for initiative is driver. And when you think about what a driver is, you're driving towards something. So your goal was for the year $2 million revenue, right? So what is the driver that you're going to implement in the system in your company today that's going to help you get there? So that's your initiative. What's that thing that you're going to do in order to make sure that you reach your goal? And so it could look like something like where we're going to onboard 2 new clients per month, every month for the rest of the year. So that's what your driver is. That's what your initiative is. And it's simply just stated that way. What is the thing that's going to get you to your goal? And then below the initiative is all your sub goals of that. Okay, how do we track our progress towards that driver or initiative?
I see. And here's the trap, or here's one of a million traps, but here's another trap. It's off the cuff. You said, all right, hey, the goal is 2 million in revenue, and the initiative, two clients a month. Okay, well, since the dawn of MSP, those exact words have been said millions of times, mostly informally, but felt formally. That's a trap, is to just say it. There's a lot of math that has to come into play of how realistic is that? What size client? What does our average client look like? Why is 2 million so important to us? Am I reading that back, or reading my thoughts to you correctly, that it's easy to say, but the work is improving why those numbers are the right numbers? Or am I overthinking it?
I think you might be overthinking it a little bit, but I can understand where you're at, right? So when you just kind of reverse your way into kind of what is needed in order to reach the goal, there's only so many levers. And I think the problem is with most businesses is they haven't chosen the levers or haven't identified what levers actually make their goals realistic. So they'll come in and say, oh, well, we need to make sure that our in order to achieve 2 million, we need to be more efficient in the company. So like that's their initiative, create efficiency. So it's kind of vague, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, it could mean that we need more ticket throughput per tech. It could mean that our dispatching needs to be better. It could mean that we need some kind of tool that's going to make the process work, more efficiently. Could be a number of things. And I think a lot of companies kind of get stuck in that. But if your goal is actually $2 million, there's only so many levers you can pull on that are actually real drivers, right? Like you need more sales, right? And you need probably more projects. You need more billable hours, right? Like you need those revenue drivers, those things that affect that P&L line of revenue. We need to look at those and say, how can I increase that? What's going to actually make a material impact on that? So often we get caught in the cost basis of things of like, which is not the driver for revenue, right? So if we're more efficient, we can do things at a cheaper cost. Well, that's not a driver for revenue. It's a driver for gross profit, maybe net profit. But so we want to really zero in on what was the goal stated and what drivers or what initiatives can actually help us achieve that goal.
Yes. So I just, my brain breaks when I think of things so simply. So I think, okay, cool. I'm deeply committed. I have to be at $2 million. I've done the light math that tells me the best way, the easiest way, the most effective way for me to get at 2 million is to add 2 new managed service clients a month. Okay. Done. Everyone agrees. That's what we're going to do. Let's put our real effort into what are those sub goals to make that happen. Hire the salespeople, get a better web landing page on it, whatever the things are. Eventually, I'm going to kind of have this moment where I say, yeah, but I guess we could also get in there by selling an additional $150,000 of project revenue this month. And gosh, now that I think about it, if I sold, $300,000 of product at 20% margin, boy, that could get me there too. And then I'm going to start going into all the other ways that we could do it. Is that something that's like, hey, yeah, go ahead and do that stuff, but only write down that most important thing and put all your working on the business energy towards crafting that?
So you just listed three initiatives right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are all drivers, right? So when we think about the levers, how do we create more revenue in the business? Well, we can either go out and get new business in the form of projects or managed services or a combination. We can look at our existing client base and we can increase their pricing. We can, create more projects for our existing clients or more hourly work. Right. So there's many different levers to pull inside that revenue. And so like when we talk about revenue, we really talk about it in multiple buckets, right? For Bering McKinley's metrics, right? So we're talking about recurring revenue, we're talking about project revenue and hourly revenue, right? Then we're also talking about hardware, software revenue, resold cloud revenue, right? So these are all our levers that we can pull on, right? So it's definitely possible that all of those could be a driver or an initiative.
Right. So I like many people, or maybe I'm the only one. I like clear rules, even when it's almost impossible to put the clear rules. So if we're talking to that person who's saying, I'm trying to get from 1.7 to 2 million, and the initiative is 2 new clients, a month for 2027. Do I only get one initiative, or can I have 2? Can I do external initiative is net new clients of 2, and my internal is, harvest, 30% pull through rate from my existing base. Can I have those 2?
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Okay.
Like my philosophy is, especially when we're talking about, like, let's kind of give the audience a clear picture of what we normally deal with. We normally deal with companies between $2 and $10 million. Like that's kind of our base of kind of fully engaged customers that work through this type of planning. So in that range, what we dissect their financials and we see where they're doing well, where they can improve, and where they're failing, right? So oftentimes we'll have a client that's doing great from a revenue standpoint, even probably great from a gross profit standpoint, but everything's shoved in that recurring bucket of revenue. And so objectively, if you just look at their P&L and they're printing like a 15 to 20% net profit at the bottom line, there's really no problem, like it's really hard to say, hey, let's fix what's broken. But we know there's other money out there. We know based on the typical blend of most MSPs that they'll be heavy into recurring revenue from agreements, but most clients absolutely want you to do project work for them. It's like it's just comes with the territory. So that pull-through rate that you're talking about is really important. So if I was working with a client that looked like that, and they're like, yeah, we're happy at 2 million, and it's like 80% recurring, we're just going to add more recurring. I'm going to say, okay, cool. Like we could do that. But you have a massive gap in what we would consider normal business practice in an MSP. Let's create an initiative to figure out if we can create more project work for you.
Okay. So then, so that I don't fall into the trap of just stacking too many drivers, too many initiatives in there, limiting in my revenue goal of $2 million in revenue. One of the initiatives is going to be the add 2 new clients a month. I can have my second initiative of start capturing the project revenue with an actual target of how much project revenue we can get. That's going to take some work to get that number. But I feel like if I added a third and a fourth, I've diluted the power that those drivers, those initiatives hold. And it's like if I'm working on everything, I'm working on nothing. So really keeping it tight to the one or two, that's resonating with me because everyone's responsible, no one's responsible. You're working on everything, you're working on nothing.
Yeah,
Am I getting it?
that's exactly right. And as you mature through, and I didn't really answer your question. Yes. So my template for clients that are starting out with us is we set their long-term plan, maybe it's a 5 or 10-year plan target, what they want to do at that point, and then we only focus on that first year. Because realistically, even with really mature companies, it's hard to look past that year. So let's focus on the year. What's kind of our revenue? We're not going to exit or anything within a year. So we still need to show up with some revenue or some gross profit. Something isn't working for us that we're going to set the goal for the year. And then I come down to what's the next 6 months look like? And that 6 months is really the realistic part of the plan. It's like we know we can get stuff done in the next 6 months if we really focus. But because it's 6 months, we have to be very careful on what we load ourselves up with. And remember, most of this stuff is extra work that you've never done before. It's not, it's working on the business, not in the business. And we're typically talking to people that are slaves to being in the business. It's just that's where they're at. That's where their head's at. That's where the game's at. And they've gotten this far, but the reason they're even engaging with us is because they want more. So I just simply say, look, I'm going to give you in the next 6 months 4 initiatives you can work on. 2 for the first quarter and 2 for the second quarter. And when we think about like that revenue driver or initiative, don't put something in there that's working. Right? Like that's the first thing. It's like if you're just adding, a typical 2 clients a month to your agreements and like that you got the sales engine working and the marketing is kind of working and like that's not really your problem. That's not something you want to drive harder on. Like that, like focus on the problems. If you have something working, let that work. Right. You've already done the right thing there.
So Gary, I think, the title of this episode should be something like Josh finally understands initiatives. All right. But what I think we should visit on an episode very soon is the fallacy of not working on enough, because I can already feel it from these listeners are saying, but what about all the other stuff? Am I just supposed to ignore all of that? That's what we need to cover, because I think we need to get into that. Okay, you got the right initiative, the right amount of initiatives. Now, how to build those out in such a way that you finally recognize that that's enough. That's enough work just to tackle that. And it doesn't mean ignoring everything else in the business. So very good, Gary. Well, thanks for helping me with initiatives. Hopefully everyone here got an even clearer picture on initiatives. And we're going to stay on this theme for a little bit, everyone. We're going to kind of work our way down a strategic plan so that when you're in your EOS or hopefully in your vision operating system, it's making more and more sense to you and you can burn fewer cycles as you go through this new habit of thinking strategically. Bye.